Welcome everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order and ask Secretary John Fink to call roll.
John Baker. Here. Denise Campbell. Count Finn here. Pascal Shapiro. Here. Sylvia Palm. Here. Albert Louis. Here. Matt Louis. Sorry. Matthew McGinnis. Here. Robert Gilbert. Present. Gil Tascano. Very good.
Great, we've got four. Tim. All right, we'll move on to agenda item B, President's procedural remarks and board member introductory comments. I want to remind everybody that our meeting is being broadcast today, so you are being recorded. And I want to announce that the LATC member, Mark Trescott, is here. Thanks for coming, Mark, all the way down from Sacramento. Tara Welsh is our board's new legal counsel. Tara, very nice to meet you. And Catherine Roussel, thank you very much for assisting in arranging the meeting site.
Oh, thank you.
We're going to break for lunch about noon, and I believe there's a cafeteria just down here. I'm not sure what other options are there. A reminder that when we vote, all motions and seconds will be repeated for the record, and votes not being on all motions will be taken by roll call. Bathrooms are just around the corner, and that's about it for procedural comments.
Why do we have to have 5 minutes in the broadcast?
It's standard practice.
Even though
Let's see our legal department. Yes.
What is?
yes.
All right. Item C, public comment for items not on the agenda. Any public comment today? Okay, all right. Item D, agenda item D. Minutes, approval of minutes.
I have one quick fix, if I may. So it's on page 3, first paragraph, and it's in a sentence regarding something I said, just to clarify. And rather than those who practice in exempt areas, it should say unlicensed individuals.
One remark. On page 4, regarding NPOP annual meeting, item G, and the members request the delegations to reach out to those applications that get access policy for those universities. And I had a few conversations and discussions with the president at that time, Christine Houghton, and the application is very aware and believing in diversity. And she personally have invited some leaders in the industry, such as San Francisco AIA's Board Seven, that to discuss and address the NPOP leadership about technical design and diversity. So that's one that we're going to there are efforts in the NPOP leadership, NPOP leadership, like this.
Any other comments on the minutes? Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
Very second. Roll call vote.
John Baker. Aye. Denise Campbell.
Each is going to be here.
Count Finn, yes. Pascal Shapiro.
Aye.
Sylvia Palm. Albert Louis. Matthew McGinnis. Robert Gilbert.
Aye.
Gil Tascano.
Aye.
Very good.
Moving on to the executive officer's report.
Thank you. You have an extensive report in your packet, so I'll just hit a few of the fine points. First and foremost, our next board meeting, please be sure it's on your calendar. We are on December the 7th in Sacramento. I also wanted to address Breeze. This is an item you've seen in prior reports. Breeze is the new enterprise system, business management system from BCA that will cover enforcement and licensing. So as I noted in our last meeting, we did have our initial meeting. It ended up being on July the 11th with BCA's IT staff and then Solid, the organizational development operation. So at that meeting, we learned more about the status, and essentially Breeze Phase 3 isn't really a phase anymore. Boards are going to be able to go in whichever direction they deem appropriate, whether it's utilizing the existing program Breeze, retaining their own IT vendor, and pursuing a different system, or something else. So we're anticipating that we'll likely be on Breeze. That's the initial plan, at least. We had a second meeting on August the 17th where we did an inventory of our processes and systems so we can map that out. And then in our next meeting, the date to be determined, we'll work on the project charter to identify key milestones and responsibilities. Another item is regarding sunset reviews, specifically the interior designers, the California Council for Interior Design Certification. The bill to extend their sunset review period is on the Senate floor. It's Senate Bill 547. And you'll recall part of those discussions were really important for us because they were regarding the definition of certified interior designer. Again, ultimately those provisions were not inserted in the bill, but the bill is moving forward nonetheless. And the process for CCIDC has been invaluable for us in that we've been able to monitor the sunset process this year. From year to year, the sunset process evolves. There are new cross-cutting issues, new dynamics. So for us, things like the current regulatory climate, what the FTC is doing, the North Carolina case, that'll set a tone that really governs what our report might look like and what issues we need to address. The next one, and this is really from a question from John Baker at the last meeting, and it was regarding the supplemental exam and the wait time to retest, because in part, as you may recall, for the ARE, the wait time from 180 days down to, I believe, it's 60. So the question is, are we able to do the same thing? And initially, and we talked about this at the last meeting, given our population, we have 1,000 candidates versus 40,000 for NCAR. Given the item bank size and the history of the exam, the ARE has been computer-based for 20 years, and we're 5 and change. So initially, it looks like the item bank would be the issue. That was feedback from our exam operation, Lopez. But I've asked them to be more definitive and give us an assessment in writing, and also identify possible variables for the future so we can build toward doing something with our wait time. So OPES will actually be at our meeting in December so we can ask questions and figure out what a plan might look like. Yes?
The item bank would be relevant, but I'm curious how many forms do we use for CS?
I don't know how much of the forms I should really go into a public forum. We don't want to be queuing certain things about the exam. I can certainly brief you. Okay, moving forward, a really important issue for LATC is regarding the internship piece. In doing the work on assessing degrees and the amount of experience required in reciprocity, which is in your packet, we noticed that a pretty big hole in that process is on the experience component. LATC and their national group, CLARP, do not have a structured internship program like we do for architecture. We've got AXP, the Architectural Experience Program. So LATC is recommending to CLARP that they develop such a system. And the reason, what we encountered on the architectural side was, when you look at an unstructured experience component, theoretically, you could have somebody doing the same exact function repeatedly for the duration of their experience piece, their internship piece. So details on one component of the building repeatedly. So the structured program ensures that emerging professionals get experience in all those critical areas of practice necessary to practice in a manner that protects the public health, safety, and welfare. And also with how NCARB is reconfigured at AXP, it correlates nicely with the exams. So theoretically, it helps prepare for licensure and taking the exams. So we'll report back on that issue. NCARB is definitely expressed an interest in being part of that dialogue. They've got the technology to help facilitate it, the app that folks can use to log their time. And then lastly, it's my tradition to always underscore our enforcement statistics because I'm very proud of them. But this time I'll put the spotlight on LATC because their metrics are really impressive. The 5-year average for case aging was 266 days, but currently they're at 109, so a major reduction. And that's in the face of having some staff turnover, the enforcement analyst position vacant for a while, and predominantly still new-ish as manager, so I'm quite pleased with those metrics. And the boards are similarly solid. We're also at 109 days versus 151 for our last round. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
A little bit about the explanation of the licensing program and the fail rate. Are we expecting that to improve in the next couple of testing periods? Or is that going to, that's higher for failure?
Right. Typically with examinations, when you roll out a new generation of the exam, whether it's new item types, new content based upon applicational analysis, you definitely do see a dip. We saw that when NCAR moved on to ARE 4.0, so it's expected that these numbers will calm over time.
And what is ARE doing to help the students with the cost? Because they're fairly big change for a big change in the program, and the student has to bear the cost.
I'm not aware of any changes as to the fees, Marcus. If you
No, I'm not sure, are you
Well, I'm
asking what kind of?
just, because ARE is now changing, right? So we have students taking tests in a whole new environment, or with a new whole system, which they weren't prepared for.
No, actually, they're doing it both. They're running both exams.
So how, this does not affect their licensing capability or possibility, because they're failing?
Well, they're running both exams right now, up until June 30th of next year. So candidates choose which version of the exam they want to take. If they after November 1st, became eligible by the state board, they were automatically put into 5.0. NCAR, for the preceding 12 to 18 months, let candidates know this is what was going to happen. NCAR was being very transparent and letting the candidates know and letting them choose which version of the exam they wanted. So, as far as, and I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, if you're asking like what sort of assistance NCAR is
But
providing?
if you're going into a new system and you're paying the fee to take the test and you fail because you prepared and the schools have prepared you for the previous exam, is this going to affect their out-of-pocket costs because you're paying at a higher rate?
That would be difficult to speculate on because schools generally don't teach to the exam. The exam, they teach to the subject, but not to the content, but not to the actual exam. The study guides and materials have been available, and even the test plan has been available for 4.0 for about 2 years. So candidates have had an opportunity to prepare themselves, and as I indicated, they select which exam they want to take. Obviously, like I said, after the 1st of November, the selection was limited to 5.0, but they were provided the information beforehand what to study and prepare for the exam. Any failed exam would technically be a setback for a candidate. And we'd start getting into the psychometrics behind how that ultimately could impact licensure.
Can I try? I think I can say a question. First of all, NCAR with 5.0, my understanding is that the price has been reduced because the number of sections have been reduced. So therefore, the cost of taking the test just right out of the gate is less. Now, I know companies, because most of the candidates, frankly, are not taking it out of school yet. We're going to be hearing about it later, about our students taking it right out of school. But right now, you really do need professional experience for 30, and by the way, they reduced the number of hours required now of professional experience from 50 in 5,000s to 3,000s. So that has been reduced, the cost has been reduced. So NCAR was trying to the extent possible of reducing costs. And companies do tend to pay for the candidates in their firms to take the test up to a certain point. I know the company I'm now with, they will pay for you when you succeed. Which doesn't really answer your question very well.
I have all thinking if you look at the actual number, you average out along line trend. So, overall, seems 85.0 is fascinating. The average out is 4.08. So, the average is all 6, 7. So, I think the candidates have to this test study.
Well, I agree, but I still feel that there was a problem in Portland. Students were still failing in certain areas that was, for me, unacceptable. Students were spending a lot of time, a lot of money on education to try to do this until they can't pass a couple of sections in those tests. So I don't know what the problem is, whether it's their internship, their educational process, or their study habits. I don't know, but something has to change because over 50% failing in certain portions of the test is
Also, if I could add that, and my hope is that programs like the very excellent iPal program that we'll learn about today will become the marketplace reality down the road. Because synthesizing and integrating the licensure components in a more logical sequence should bear dividends here. Also, NCAR made an extra effort this year to communicate with the profession, AIA, and even the test prep companies to dispel urban myths about the exam and share content information that's publicly available. Just making sure that everybody's working from the same base of knowledge. So extra steps like that, again, should be dividends down the road.
I think there's a couple of problems. One of them is NCAR 5.0 exam wasn't very well integrated. Isolated sections of the test. Now it's integrated, so it's probably more difficult, but it's more relevant. And I don't know if some of those sections schools in the past have focused a lot in teaching students about practice management program, some of those categories. Second thing, and I know I'm probably working very hard to try to do this and working with firms and training supervisors, that all those candidates are going through the AHP program, how meaningful that effort is and how much real learning is going on in each of these categories is also an area that has to be strengthened in order to help improve performance. Do some of this stuff in actual applications, students really can't until they get into the workforce. But I kind of share Melissa's concern maybe from a little bit different perspective, and that is that, we know there's always a little bit of a dip in passing rates when they release a new exam, so you can't expect that. But consistently across the board, almost every single category, California candidates are performing lower than the national average. And I would like to see, staff going back to the board a little bit more detailed with just these summary numbers and see if we can get an idea as to sort of candidates by different categories, credit degree, non-credit degree, experience on whatever. Try to get a sense as to whether or not there's an area where it's bringing the average down and see what the problem is. Because based on these numbers, you can see if there's something going on, but there's not a darn thing you can do about it because there's not enough information to know where the source of it is.
Marcus?
So I've actually had the discussion with our psychometrician on the subject, and because California, and Doug has mentioned this previously at other meetings, because we have a variety of different ways that individuals can come in, there are more variables than any entity can actually account for, because you have factors specific to each person and the path that they took, the opportunities that were available to them that may not have been available to others. These are all things that are outside of the board's control, because we don't know that these individuals exist until they apply with the board. And so by that time, their circumstances are already set. And so whatever advantages or disadvantages they may have had, at that point are virtually impossible for us to compensate for. And this is paraphrasing what he had told me. That essentially it's just as Doug said, there's just so many different ways. It's not a set path where you can say, here's where the bottlenecks could occur. Unfortunately, we have candidates that start the process, stop, and then come back into the process later. And some of them do well, and some of them do not.
I know there's a lot of variables and we provide opportunity for people to vote for pathways, but I think it's very important for us to understand what pathways are more successful than others so that when people are coming to our board and understanding the different pathways, they know which pathways are the best pathways that we essentially choose to do. But we need to understand, so we need to provide that data.
I think Emily's absolutely right. And that's my point. There's a million variables in every person's life that you'd have, a variable for every individual person. But we have some broad categories that we can compile data in some way that maybe we can't fix it for the individual who's testing today. But maybe if we have better understanding of the circumstances, we can address it systemically so that in the future, candidates have a better result.
I disagree. I think it's a double-edged sword. I think that you're going to take data that you don't have a great understanding of, and classify it in particular ways. And what you get out of it might not be supportive for what we're trying to do for multiple paths. Versus if it comes out that people that haven't gone to school and only have experience are passing at a much lower rate, then that gives other jurisdictions reason to say, hey, maybe they shouldn't be taking the license test. Maybe we don't want these candidates. I don't know that you're going to do a lot to change the test to help people. I mean, the test has to be, the whole thing I've always heard about the test is, this is a minimum level of competence. So we shouldn't be dialing that down for anybody. The fact that we offer multiple paths is great, but I think if you go after this data, what comes out of it might be useful for somebody else. And I don't think the data is going to give clear information.
Nobody's suggesting that we compromise the rigor of the exam. And if an individual selects a pathway that puts them at a disadvantage where it's going to take them longer, it's just going to take them longer. But because it might reveal something that we don't think is attractive, is not a good excuse not to look at the information and understand what's really happening.
I agree with that. I guess my concern is assimilating the data in a way that's understood, that's reading properly. So Marcus says there's a million different ways to get here. We're going to try to classify them in small boxes. I just want to understand that, what is it that we're looking at.
I think the way getting their students now, but don't they actually have like how much education you've had, how much office experience, etc. And the other way that you need some better than these other things that are really hospital.
Staff will work with NCAR. We have some of the data already, but let us work with NCAR and see how it can be stratified in. As I noted, immediately we should have our second nutrition with us to talk about the CSE index. So that will help the board adjust the data and understand the extent to which we need to take it with a grain of salt in the light of all the variables. So I think that would be a good way to view it at our next meeting. And one additional note, if I may. Is you have something on that area?
Actually, I was going to go back to where the conversation started with regards to this cost. Something else I think should be said about cost. Historically, and up until now, for the very first time, it's students are going to be allowed to take the exam by virtue of the IPL program. Historically, we weren't eligible to take the exam until we had 5 years of education, or you were already in the workplace, so you were working. Also, as Sylvia mentioned, 4.0 is 7 divisions, 5.0 is 6 divisions. But there's a very intensive coaching program that's out there available for candidates who are interested, that depending on which parts of the exam they take in 4.0, they can transition into 5.0 and pass the ARA with only 5 divisions. So there's distinctly some advantages depending on how the individual approaches the examination process.
And when you say coaching, what's that?
It's website, online, NCAR, been going on for a year.
So is it a free service?
Free service. And there's a calculator that lets you put in the parts of the exam you passed and suggest which parts you should take.
Is that information available to students?
Yeah. It's available to you, me, and everybody.
Yeah, but we're in the know, so we help get do students? Because sometimes that information.
Remember that until the IPEL program came forth, students weren't taking the exam, they weren't eligible.
So the more appropriate was candidates.
Okay,
Yeah.
So my additional note, if I may, I neglected to mention, we did talk about the CSE wait time at a meeting we had last week with AICC's Emerging Professionals Academy. In fact, they memorialized their interest in that issue. We left a letter for you, so we have some written public comment on that to help drive what we do for December.
Just a question on CSE. Have we seen the test plan in CSE? Will we see it in December?
We had a presentation from Raul, did we not?
Yes, 2014.
2014.
it's 5%.
Well, I'm assuming it's being updated based on the release of 5.0. There's some changes going on. We've looked at the 5.0 test plan, and we're supposed to be evaluating the effectiveness of CSE based on all that.
We always use the most recent occupational analysis from NCOR to do a side-by-side analysis. Process. That's how you drill down on not redundant testing.
So is there not a new test plan for the CSE coming out as a result of that?
No, the test plan that we have right now is the 2014 test plan. That'll be in effect for the next occupational analysis, probably around 2019, 2020.
Next, move on, agenda item F, presentation, Woodbury University's integrated math, architectural licensure, by Will Wallisher.
It's okay. Sweet, thank you. Thank you all very much for inviting us to speak to you. We're going to turn the lights down, and those of you, I do have some slides that I'm going to go through, and I don't know if you want to stand at the cocktail table or watch them. So I've been asked to talk about our IPEL program. My name is Ingela Walrus-Bitter. I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture here at Woodbury, and I'm really happy to be hosting you here on our campus. We just had fires a few days ago that almost meant that we evacuated, but we didn't, so it's kind of we're still a little bit shaky. So what I was going to do is give an overview, about 15 minutes, and then we have a student here, Vanessa Shealy, and I'd like to ask her then to talk about her experience. So she's now in her second year of the program. And I'm also accompanied here with Catherine Roussel, AIA, who is our career and outreach coordinator and is helping coordinate the IPEL program. So let me say a few things about Woodbury specifically as a School of Architecture. So when we go out and talk about our program, we talk about IPEL a lot. And we have found that students are incredibly interested in our school because we offer IPEL. And so that's, for us, very exciting. We're also offering it to both of our B-Art and our M-Art students. We're one of the few schools across the country that offer it to both of our programs. As you can see there's a whole bunch of other programs that we offer, a one-year post-professional architecture program, a one-year post-professional real estate development program. We have a BFA, a 4-year interior architecture program as well. We launched a Master of Interior Architecture program that's not listed here. That should be an MIA, not an MFA. And then we just launched the Landscape Architecture program in San Diego. We have a campus here in Los Angeles and also one in San Diego. So the School of Architecture, we have about 420 students here. And of those, about over 70% of them identify as minority. So that is something that we take a lot of pride in. I think that the excellence of our program is because we're diverse. And I'll talk about that a little bit. But we really work very closely with our students. We talk about the spectrum of diversity, and it's not just cultural, it's economic. There are fewer and fewer places where you have people from different economic spectrums who are working together in a common pursuit. Our pedagogy is very diverse. Our faculty are diverse. They're presenting material in very diverse ways. And that's all part of what we talk about, the diversity. But ultimately, our students are coming from, a lot of them are local, a lot of them are first generation, a very large percentage of them are first generation, and we are a designated Hispanic serving institution. So we have world-class faculty, and they're all very committed, a lot of practitioners here. We have 3 FAIAs, Barbara Bester and 2, and Janine Centuri, all women, who are practicing and teaching. We also have a number of PhD scholars and also a lot of experimental makers. But I would say that the sort of focus on the profession is incredibly important to us. And I would say an underlying core value is what I call the ethical imperative. And you can talk about ethics in a lot of different ways. I think we need to talk about it in much broader terms than what the AIA, for example, will present ethics. And I think now more than ever, we as architects have to carry this mantle. And I can talk about this for 2 hours, so I won't. But I wanted to put that out there. And I think that for us as educators, one of the biggest ethical imperatives is to help our students get jobs, to be marketable when they leave here, and to give them a very clear path to licensure. And that's what we're all here to talk about. So we have a dedicated career office. I mentioned to you that we're a Hispanic serving institution. We, as a school, are the recipients of 2 federal grants, $2.4 million federal grants, because we're a Hispanic serving institution. That was able to launch a lot of our support systems that provide students help along this pathway. And one of them was our career office, so Catherine Roussel, who's a licensed architect. I bet you there are not very many schools of architecture that have a licensed architect who is a dedicated career advisor to the students. So that's something, again, that highlights our commitment to practice. So just a little bit of a shout out to some of our students are out there practicing in architecture. Diana Tran, for example, 40 Under 40 by Design Magazine's Jermaine Barnes, working in Miami, who's a graduate of our MR program. This is Jen Hope. She's now working on her licensure. She works in the city, LA City Mayor Garcetti's office. Mike Burnett is one of our San Diego grads who specializes in these development and architect as well. So these are all alumni. This is Ignacio Rodriguez, an alumnus here, who's a licensed architect and a member of the AIA as well. And he is somebody who just gave us $30,000 for one of our funding one of our studios. So this is just a few, just giving you a little bit of a face to who our students are and why IPEL is so important to us. So you may know my former dean, Norman Millar, who sadly passed away last year, was incredibly passionate about the IPEL program. So we jumped on it immediately and thought that, well, first of all, he was instrumental in getting to the table, the ACSA, NAB, and CARB, the architects boards, to really, I think, help launch this program, and speaking very strongly as the president of the ACSA and putting the whole weight of that organization behind this initiative. So Woodbury, from the very beginning, saw this as something that would provide incredible value. So this is sort of a mini presentation of this. Is when we present this program to our students, this is what we tell them, that in order to get an architectural license, what is it you need? A professional degree from a program accredited by NAB. So we, of course, have our BARC and our MARC are both NAB accredited. 3,740 hours of experience, which is part of the AXP program. And, of course, successful passing of the architectural registration exam. We're now up to 5.0. So why is IPEL important? So this is me. This is my track 30 years ago. I got my master's degree at UCLA. I then worked for 4 years, and then I took my exam. And for me, it took probably about 8 years for that entire process. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I didn't like that. It was 7 years education because I had a bachelor's and a master's, and then 4 years of experience. So on average, as you all know, it probably still takes about 11 to 13 years to get for students to get an exam. So currently, more and more of our students, and that's something that Catherine works with our students, trying to get them to get some of their experience while they're students. So they're working in the summers. They're taking time even during the regular semester to get that work experience. And then after they graduate, so this is more similar, more to where we are now on average in terms of the amount of time it takes to get licensed. So what IPAL allows us to do is to integrate the experience and the exam taking, as you were all just discussing, while they're students. And I think that's a pretty remarkable shift. Just speaking as an educator, I think students are still very much in a learning mindset while they're still students, and I think that it's a very healthy idea. I do know, having spoken to other educators, that there are schools that don't want to participate in the program. They think that it interferes with, the primary mission that they see that isn't professionally oriented. But I think that, we as Woodbury University, as I've highlighted, I think that we see this as part of this ethical imperative that I was talking about. So in 2015, our initial proposal for our VR program was accepted by NCARB. And it was supported by all of these organizations, including Popular Architects Board, thank you. And we established a consortium of firms. And so this is the list of the firms that we started with on our first year, including in Los Angeles and also in San Diego. And this was our first cohort of students here in Los Angeles that began working in the summer of 2016. Now, what do you notice about that picture? A lot of women, which I think is awesome. That trend has not continued, but I was fascinated by the fact that 8 out of the 9 candidates were women, and that was just what happenstance. And I will say that our student body is about 35% women, so we do not follow the national trend in terms of gender balance. Anyway, that was just an aside. And also in 2016, that was the year that our MR program that we applied for and were accepted by NCARB. So this last summer, we now have 25 students, including grad students here and in San Diego, that were accepted into the IPAL program. So we had continuing firms, and we also had new firms that were now taking some of our interns. And just as a commentary, some of the continuing firms, one office lost a significant project, so they didn't have room for an intern. So there were different reasons why some of the firms opted not to continue with us. So this is now looking a little bit more detail. This is our VR program, and it reads from the bottom up. So the first year, the students are just studying as they would normally. And second year, they then apply for the program, and it's a competitive process in their second year. So this is unique to Woodbury. This is how we've decided to develop our program. And every school has a different process and a different way that they're integrating the program into their curriculum. So in their second year, then, in the summer, they start working. And they get, it's a competitive process. We put forward the portfolios. The firms then select the students. They interview the students just as they would an intern, and they then start working. By the third year, they're just working in the summer, still working in the summer. And after their fourth year, they then are taking a year out, and that's how they're building up their hours. This is a diagram that Catherine herself put together, where she's looking at a sort of recommended path that talks about, so here's the curriculum that just goes forward, marches forward independently. We're not changing the curriculum at all. But this is looking at the AXP hours and looking how it might be recommended to the offices that take our interns the kind of experience the students should be expected to have. So every summer we're hoping that the students have about 580 hours of experience. And then you can see in the year out, that's when they're getting a significant chunk of that experience time and then coming back. We're recommending that the exams can start after the third year, in the fourth year, but they can start taking the exam right away. Which I think is pretty exciting. My colleague Mark likes to say that we're building the plane while we're flying it. So as you can see, this is very much in development, and what we're looking for is feedback from the firms, from the students, from the whole community about how to improve and how to just make this program work for our students. So this is just a similar diagram for MARC. Our MARC program is a 3-year professional program. The year out is in their penultimate year, and the slight difference here is that they're also working in the summer after they've completed their diploma. But again, here are the AXP hours. This is the recommended sort of, this is the sort of menu that we would give to the offices and just say this is the type of experience that your intern should be getting in order to work towards the AXP hour expectations. And again, working with the students to get licensed. So this is just a schedule that Catherine put together. We start working with the students. As I said, it's a competitive process. The students have to apply to be in this program. So you're getting very ambitious students and again, part of this has been our being able to communicate to the students, having workshops with them, letting them know that this opportunity is available to them, and getting them to start thinking about it much sooner than we had in the past. But as I said before, that we also talk about it while we're going out there, and especially for our transfer students who are already thinking about licensure, this is a very great interest to them. So we start working with them in the fall on getting their portfolio together, and by February, that's a very short window, they have a portfolio that they're ready to send out to the firms, and the firms then have a selection to choose from, and they then hire the students. And there we have a happy Vanessa working with a happy staff at Bruin Associates, and she'll talk about that. So one of our plans is to put together a resource center here in the library with all the exam materials. We have all the exam materials in our library, but we thought it would be nice to actually have set up a designated area. And alumni are also looking for this type of resources from their host home institutions. But to really provide them with the materials and a place for them to have study groups and study for the exam. So we want to do that for our current students and also for our alumni who are also very active in trying to get licensure. So the keys to success, we've listed a few of them here. As I said, it's a very competitive process, and the students are very motivated to do this. They're very excited by this sort of shortened time span. And I will say also that by starting to work earlier, they become more marketable. And one of our students pointed out that has an economic effect. In other words, they're more valuable to the offices sooner. And I think, again, that was a benefit that one of the students pointed out to us that I hadn't even thought about. But that was pretty exciting. So a lot of firms have expressed interest, but it takes time for us to explain to them you're not just taking an intern. You have to work with these interns. We're asking a lot of these firms to now work with those interns and make sure these are sometimes second-year students. So it's a little bit of a challenge to give them the experience that they should be building up towards. And this is all part of the challenge. This is all part of the building the flying machine. So, the streamlining of the licensure process that you were just referring to has made this possible. Fewer hours now of experience, and also access to the ARE. And of course, working with, so Catherine now notifies NCARB, these are the students who are in the program, and once those have been accepted, they can now start taking the exam. So we work really closely with NCARB to make sure that those names are listed and reviewed, and to make sure that everybody is aware that these are the students in our program that are approved to start taking the exam while they're students. So one of the challenges we found is raising awareness about this program in the profession. We rely, it has felt a little lonely sometimes, but we rely on people or organizations. So we've been, for example, working very closely with Los Angeles AIA and also the San Diego chapter AIA and our San Fernando Valley, which is very close to us here, and asking them to inform their constituents about this program. So that's one way that we've been reaching out today to organizations to help us to spread the news. So, there's still people in the profession, for example, professional architects who are not aware of this program. And even if they are aware of it, they don't really understand the details. And I think that's for all of us, the sort of, communicating and making sure everybody understands that this is available. We really appreciate the newsletter is going to be coming out pretty soon that talks about this program, the newsletter, and also letters to the firms. And these are all the letter to the firm that you may or may not know that we sent out. We got calls from Perkins & Will. We got calls from firms saying, this looks really interesting, how can we participate? So thank you, and let's just keep getting the word out. So we're also continuing to outreach one-on-one. You know, that's my job. I call the firms. I'm an architect. I was on the LA chapter board for many years, so I'm well connected, and I use those connections and get our students placed into the firms. And that's a pretty arduous process, but it is very worthwhile. And finally, we're then marketing also and doing, talking to ArchiNet, talking to publications, Architects newspaper, and ultimately I feel like it's a win-win for our students. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now Vanessa is here, and she's one of our first students who was accepted in that first cohort. And maybe you can say a few words about your experience.
Sure. So my name is Vanessa. I'm in my third year of the architecture program, my bachelor's here at Woodbury. And I applied, it was the end of my first year. Prior to Woodbury University, I had actually already been involved in architecture and working in it was a 2 to 3 person office. And I was also taking classes in my community college. So I was certain that I wanted to take this path, and I thought it was a wonderful opportunity for myself who, kind of wanted to get a head start. I felt like I had backtracked, maybe staying too long at community college for 3 years, so I said this would be a great opportunity, and I was certain that I wanted to get my license in architecture. So when I applied, I got accepted into Gruen Associates, which is in Los Angeles, and I would say that office that hired me offered me great opportunities, and I feel like has helped me a lot, and it's a great learning environment. I chose to stay with them. So they hired me after my first year. It was my first summer in the program. They hired me, and I chose to stay with them for another year. So this was my second summer working at Gruen Associates. And my decision to stay was because of the learning environment. My supervisors, Deborah Gerard, she's also an AIA. She's helped me a lot, make sure that I'm a part of projects that will help me get my hours, and not only that, but also compared to my other coworkers who are also emerging professionals, and so they also help me in the office. They're more than open to questions, and I've made sure that by staying at the office, I'm always asking questions, always in contact with all of my coworkers and my supervisors, and they take the time that I need for when I have questions for any simple question, whether it be something that I researched or about the drawings. I think that not only the faculty that has helped get me into the program and are kind of guiding me, also the people that work in the office, they work as a team and have helped me. I think that is affecting me a lot of the way that I learn and doing school and working. It's helped me a lot. I think it's given me a different perspective. Graduate and then start working. I've gotten the best of both worlds, and it hasn't affected my school in any way because I work in the summers, and they left it open for me to come back winter. And I think I've had a great experience so far in the IPAL program. I feel like it's really molding me into the type of architects that California wants to see, and a type of youth and students that are willing and in the office and know what it's like to be professionals. So, if you guys have any questions, I can answer.
So I just want to make 2 points. I gave a similar presentation to CC AIA with Marvin a few weeks ago, and somebody brought up the fact, and this is something that I'm realizing more and more, we're asking a lot of the firms to take on these students, because they're still students, and to now integrate them into their projects probably sooner than they would usually be integrated. So one of the recommendations that somebody threw out was, couldn't AIA, for example, give us a discount? So if you're a designated IPAL firm, is there some designation, or is there some benefit that you can have? I went to one small firm, for example, and they said, you know what, this is going to cost us $20,000 a year. And when you start to think about it in those terms, and I'm now hiring somebody that's not quite yet contributing in the way that I expected. Of course, larger firms, and you saw that first cohort of firms, those are larger firms who have those resources to be able to support the students. So that's just something, just a little bug in your ear to start thinking about. How do we recognize those firms who are willing to take on that responsibility. This is a shared enterprise, so it's not just the schools, but it's also the firms that we're expecting to participate very actively. The other point I wanted to make is Jonathan Ward, who's who's at NBBJ, you know him, but he came to us and he said, this has had a benefit to us. We offer an incentivization program to our interns to get licensed. And those people, they're 4, 5, 6 years out of school, they now see second-year students coming in and starting to take the license. So it has really incentivized their own interns to get licensed quicker. And that's another sort of effect, ripple effect of this whole project, or this whole program that we're doing. And I think that is exciting that it has another unintended effect within the offices itself.
A question going through this. In the early years, are you looking to, are these students all integrated with each other? Those who aren't in IPAL, are there special classes for those who?
The curriculum has not changed, and I can't emphasize that enough. Our curriculum hasn't changed. What will happen, and I think it's to our benefit, is that we're getting feedback from firms saying, you know what, they should learn BIM sooner. That kind of thing. And there's resistance. We have faculty like, wait, I'm not sure. But, this is part of the dialogue that takes place. So we have gotten feedback. They would have more value to us if they had these experiences. So we've talked about a different type of second-year experience, actually. So, we're licensed architects. There could be a different type of experience that we're giving second-year students, and only in the third year might we. So this is all part of the development of the whole program.
A couple of comments. First, a thank you, because what you're doing for students in helping place them in firms is probably the most valuable thing you can do for their career advancement. And I know it's a huge undertaking.
It is.
We've had very good luck with the interns we've had in our office and things, so that's all been good. Just a byproduct observation. One of the things that you're doing by doing that is, regardless of what happens with their licensure track, when they get out of school and they graduate, they've already got real hands-on experience in firm. How many years did we go through where we would get graduates who put all the time in, spent all the money, got their degrees, had zero experience in an office, and had to start out at the bottom of the food chain because they really didn't know anything that we could use effectively when they started. So this is a huge thing for them. And I think it was a great disservice to students in those years to have them go through all that with the promise of being an architect and not even be able to get a job.
I remember how clueless I was.
What I am curious about, and you've already sort of answered the question I was going to ask it, but now I'll ask why. I would have expected this program, with the track and the timing that you're under, to immediately have an impact on your programs. That your early programs would be restructured to start to prepare students and candidates for these new roles and these new positions, whether it's test taking or internship. I'm glad to see that you're thinking about it, but I'm surprised that it didn't start out that way.
For anybody who's taught, there's something very precious about the academy, and I'll just say as somebody who's now moved into teaching. I'm still a practicing architect, but there's something very precious still about the sort of, the kind of magic that takes place in the studio. And the older I get, the more I think it's seamless with the professional practice. But I understand some faculty who feel differently. And in a way, I have to respect that also, and that there are different learning outcomes, there are different ways of learning that you have in the studio that is different than a workplace. And maintaining those and ensuring that that you still have the sort of freedom to teach in those ways. It's an ongoing dialogue that we have here. And as I said before, we have, practitioners on one side of the table saying, this is what we should be teaching. On the other hand, we have, the PhD, the people with very different backgrounds. And our students, and I started with that, they're not all, and I forgot to mention this, but I would say probably 85% of them say that they want to get licensed. But that they're going to move off those tracks. We know that the pipeline is leaky. And so you want them to have the broadest possible education so they can do a lot of different things. So, it's just part of this larger conversation. Our students are notoriously bad test takers. I don't know how much you know, but Woodbury students don't pass the exam. I mean, there's some of the comments earlier about, our students are not good test takers, and you shouldn't be hearing this. But this is a way for us to help them through that, and I feel it's that obligation that we all feel, that ethical imperative to help them as much as possible to see that as their future.
Well, I would just add this quickly as a last comment. The more you focus on structuring your programs to prepare them, the more we can help you and help your students.
Yeah. And, I was just speaking to a alum who is a licensed architect and a donor, and he was just saying, just have your students take the test, practice test. This is something that Catherine and I have talked about. Just even those who aren't on the track, why not? Integrate that as part of the learning outcome. So, even alumni are coming back to us and saying, here's some suggestions for how you might be able to integrate it. It's that sort of library, that learning center that we were thinking of setting up in terms of the ARE and making it more intentional. USC, as you probably all know, has a really aggressive and Notley, program. Our students, sometimes they participate in that, and sometimes they don't. I feel like we need to provide a community with this.
You mentioned in the presentation that you're serving. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so the federal government designates institutions that have over 25% of their student body as Hispanic. And so that means that we qualify for federal funding. And those two huge grants that we got were because we're a Hispanic serving institution. That was the old White House. But there was a tremendous, sorry, didn't get that conversation here, but there was a tremendous push, and I think it was really important that this came from the federal government saying, you say you're a professional degree program, show us that those students are working. And that was what those Title V grants that we received were basically saying, and that's why we set up a career office, we set up our making complex, our digital fabrication lab. We graduate, a lot of our students go on to work in fabrication labs, actually. We have a whole little mini track of people who are fabricating. And it's because of the money that we got from the federal government because we're a Hispanic serving institution.
So a follow-up question, just one more second. Out of your 420 students that are how many of those stay in the United States?
I would say the great majority of them.
80%?
Well, 20% of them are international, so let me back out. The domestic students, almost all of them stay. You'll hear one or twice. We had some who went off to London and Paris and China, for example, but they invariably came back. The international students, we had some questions from international students saying, can we participate? And we don't see any reason why they can't. So that's a question, throwing back to you. I know that's a different path that they would be taking. And, when you're working each country, of course, your national conversation about architectural licensure globally. But I would say most of the students, do you have any intention of leaving? I would say they're even here in Los Angeles. I would say it's probably 70% of them stay in LA.
We do a first destination survey. Almost all of our graduates stay in LA.
But we're also drawing. We're a really highly ranked school that is essentially a commuter school. That's something that we take pride in. This is not a big. There's lots of big institutions out there that have different goals and different missions. We serve our community. And our student body looks like our community and looks like California, and that's something that that's a different demographic. These are students who came out of the public schools. They're underprepared, in many ways. And so that's the demographic that we're serving, and we're really excited about that.
So the thing about how attractive an applicant is to really be in the program, you have to hire them to a willing intern firm. So if a firm drops out for a reason, does that mean the student then is no longer in the program potentially? And so what does that impact their ability to...
So what we did with those students is we found different firms for them. There's nothing that really requires them to stay in that firm. So Vanessa, I think, had an incredibly positive experience, and she had a firm that was willing to invest in that. But we did have firms, as I mentioned, who dropped out of the program for various reasons, and we then found different firms. I mean, essentially, if you're looking at the experience, I know I worked for many different architects when I left school, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the same office. So we actually give the students the choice. Some students actually opted to work in a different office. We had one student who's working in a small design firm and wanted to work in a larger firm environment. So she actually opted to move into a different firm. So it's actually up to them to choose whether, and so it's a negotiation with the firm, then whether you continue with them or if you switch. I think, what you're saying, I think finding a firm that will commit to them for 4 years is probably the best solution for everybody, but that's not going to happen, and I don't think that has to be a requirement.
But my point is something that's really out of the student's hand to some extent. You lose firms,
It is.
and the applicant's out of the program. It's kind of not their fault.
No, they won't be out of the program. We'll find them another firm, or we'll help them find another firm. And this is important also that we do. It's still competitive. I'm not sure that was clear. We're still sending those resumes to firms. They choose who to hire. So we have 2 students, for example. They were first-year students who chose to send out nobody wanted to hire them. They were just finished their first year. There was nothing in our program that said you can't. So it's still, we're leaving it still, the student has to demonstrate capability to be able to work in the firm, and they're still going through a competitive process where they're being hired by firms. So it's not a guarantee, and we can't guarantee it.
One final question. How many applications do you get on a yearly basis for your program?
I think the company maybe can answer that.
We have about 40 or 50 applications,
And out of those, how many do you accept?
about 10.
But this is the other thing that we tell the students, there's nothing that prevents them from doing this anyway. Right? They can still be getting all of their experience while they're students, and then take the licensing exam upon graduation.
Sorry, every question has a follow-up. Out of the 10 that you accept, how many would be local or U.S. international?
So I think we have maybe 1 or 2 international students right now. But I think maybe 50 is probably a fine number because not everyone in the studio would have applied. So
Yeah, I think that sounds too high
yeah,
for
I think
me.
it's too high. So
I think it was
mean,
about 50% of the students were accepted into the program.
I would say about
And those that weren't were told, try again next year.
And your application costs?
There's no cost. No cost. No cost.
Same.
So, I just wanted to observe that, make an observation about the IPOP program vis-a-vis sort of the status quo. You mentioned this, that there are definitely programs that do not want to entertain IPOP whatsoever yet. I think they're taking a wait-and-see attitude, and in fact, I would say that some of them go so far as to be skeptical of it.
That's exactly right.
One of them is my alma mater, Berkeley, who really believes in that, you call it the academy. Absolutely. And so when I came out with a 4-year degree, I couldn't work because I didn't know anything at all. And then I stayed behind I stayed around and got a master's. And then after that, I was able to work finally. But it took 6 years. And I started at the bottom, as you mentioned, which I think is the sort of the status quo. So not every institution is going to want that. And so those of you who self-selected are giving us a whole new shift in the paradigm. And I think that just by the fact that you get 40, 50 in a relatively small school as Woodbury, shows that the interest is really strong.
I think there's interest there. I think the students especially, that's where it's really coming from.
Right.
And their parents, I would say.
Yeah, because they're going to get to market, so to speak, much faster than somebody like me that took, all those years.
I know, and this is what's wonderful about being part of the academy. Some students need to wander, and you want to give them that too. And my brother was a wanderer, and that was okay. And and I think this is what it's a choice that the students make, and all we can do is give them one more choice in terms of getting to licensure.
And then beyond that,
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and beyond that, there are people who, like, as you mentioned, they lead through the pipeline. They go to get a PhD eventually. They don't need their license yet. They go and work for the owner. They work for a construction firm. They work for a CM. So there are a lot of people who don't necessarily need a license, but they're really thrilled to have the background as an architecture major. So I guess I'm just saying that this program might, I don't know what it's going to represent over time.
Yeah.
But I kind of see it always as maybe like a 20%er rather than taking over the entire.
I absolutely agree with you. I don't think this is going to be everybody.
Yeah.
And right now, I think it's about 24 schools that have opted into this.
Out of 400 or how many schools are there?
Yeah, I think it's about 200 schools. So,
Okay, so it's 10. Is that 10%?
that's a very small percentage.
I didn't think we were
But we're the early adopters.
Yeah, of course you are. We know that because of Norman.
Yeah.
I have one more finish before you jump in. So then on your other point that you brought up, which is the cost of the firms, I have an idea, which I just don't know how.
Because we require the firms to pay the interns.
Of course, I
Which
understand.
we do across the board, though. You have to understand all of our interns.
No, I totally understand. I get that, and then I also heard you say that they are kind of starting to wonder, how can we pay them when they don't really do? They don't offer quite enough of a value. So the only thing I can think of is maybe to bring up to our friends at NCARD or elsewhere, if there are grants. Okay, and these grants could come from any number of different sources, whether it's fundraising, whether it's by a very wealthy donor who sees this as a great education. Something that we all might want to put our heads together.
I think that's a great suggestion.
For example, just by pure coincidence, I'm now on the West Carbs Executive Committee, and we're having a meeting very shortly. I could bring it up to them and say, hey, here's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Is there something that NCARB can think about as a scholarship for the firms to do that quickly? I'll just be really quick. At one point in San Francisco, there was a program called Enterprise for High School Students. And they actually brought in high school students who are architecturally focused, and they paid us to pay them, or something like that.
Yeah.
They paid us to put them.
So it's like a work study.
Yeah, work exactly. And so maybe something like that.
Right.
So anyway, let's keep that dialogue.
And one of the other things I've been thinking about, because I do a lot of engagement with the philanthropy for the school, is saying that this is a philanthropic gift, and then you can get some tax returns. So that's where I'm thinking a little bit. I don't have all the nuts and bolts yet, but thinking about it as a sort of a gift as well.
There's for safety and problems, and we've done a couple of sentences that kind of keep talking, but practice.
And I don't think they're part of the program.
We're not. And we're thinking about it. And one of our problems is really different from you in the sense that we're kind of professionally isolated out there.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so,
I've heard that as an issue.
and so that's one of our problems. We have
so many firms
two
to
really
choose
good
from.
off-campus programs in Portland, one down here in LA, with Steve Phillips, and the other one in San Francisco. And so we're trying to look at that. I agree with you though, the fact that we're also seeing we've got like 10 or 20% maybe, because there are so many different variables.
Rural,
in the
yeah,
education.
exactly.
You want to do different
What's
things.
Cornell going to do? I mean, there's like 3 firms in Ithaca, so.
Yeah.
So we had somebody from Stanford, I think, even though they don't have an architecture program, I had somebody contact me saying, we have students who are interested in this. Can we, glom on to your program? And I found that interesting. I'm not sure what the, but that was a sort of small firm that doesn't have a lot of local, small school that doesn't have a lot of local firms, and I've heard that's an issue. One of my colleagues across the city, where I used to teach, I won't tell you the institution, said publicly, and that's why I feel like I can share this with you. It's like, why the academy is being asked to fix NCARB's problem. You said that in front of 400 people, and I was like, that's I guess one way to look at it. But again, as I said, I feel one of the things that I found is connecting with the firms in a really, you now have an agreement with the firms, and that has only benefited us. And it benefits those students who are not in the program as well. So now we have a pipeline, so they're taking students both in IPAL, but also students who aren't in IPAL. We have a lot of students who don't want IPAL. They want to travel in the summer. They want to do different things in the summer. So I think even within the student body, it's probably only about, just considering the size of your cohort, it's probably 10 each year out of a cohort of about 50 students. So already that's self-selecting, and we're getting the most ambitious students by far. But who have a very clear understanding of where they want to go.
So I just had a comment. To me, the biggest Achilles heel of this program is the economy. And you're in a very safe place for the moment.
That's exactly
That's
right.
great. I really appreciate Sylvia's comment because I think you have to look forward to some sort of fail-safe that it gives another way of funding this or finding ways to make it work. Because, if the economy takes a tank, then there's no work. So that's the big Achilles heel and what I've always been a little fearful of for this program. But coming up with other ways of funding, ways to keep it going.
We're not guaranteeing the students. We're also encouraging them to keep looking. So we know that's. I wasn't that long ago. 6 years ago. We're now drowning. We have more. People looking for interns than we actually have students. So we have the opposite problem now. About 5 years ago, we had the exact opposite. And that's when we actually implemented. We reduced our work experience hours. All of our students are required to do a certain number of work experience hours anyway. They were required to do that to graduate, and we reduced it in direct response to that. A lot of them were having trouble finding firms, and we require them to pay. So that just adds,
And just to follow up on that with the pay, did you set that at a wage, or was it just set by the market?
Set by the firms. We don't. That's not really our business.
So just curious, any data is communicating your general admission of architecture program is impacted because we now have both BR and MTOP as an IPAL program.
I'm sorry, thank you.
The general, what is your two IPAL programs have impact on the general admission of architecture?
It hasn't had any. I will say though that that hasn't changed. Nothing has changed because of IPAL. But again, I think students see that we're offering the program, and our hope is that we'll get some ambitious students who apply here who might not have considered Woodbury otherwise. So for us, that's an incentive.
Doug, does working for the Division State Architect count for experience?
That's a good question. I don't know how much experience you can be in the public practice setting. Do you have a sense, Marcus, for AXB?
For AXB, as long as they're working under licensed credit.
So shouldn't our fellow state agencies be encouraged or accept interns that we should make them actively participate?
What not to do.
We had one student who wanted to do the Paris trip, and fortunately, just coincidentally, the Paris studio was being taught by a licensed architect. So he went to Paris and worked with her in Paris.
Just a suggestion on the matrix or the slide that you have here. I would consider firm's benefit or for a mutual benefit so that interns can have a better chance of being into a firm. Maybe the construction and evaluation hours that you have in the second and third year, 0 goes out, put them up in the fourth and fifth year, and then add those 40 hours into the documentation timeline. Because basically what's going to happen is when these students come in, they're mostly going to be on the drawing,
right.
Picking up red lines. So that gives them, it opens the door a little bit better for them,
Yeah.
for a second and third year student. in CA, construction, they're not gonna,
That's
no firm's gonna let anybody
Yeah,
close to that.
that's a really
second
good
and
point.
third.
And again, this is recommended, but we want feedback exactly like that. And that's one thing that Catherine's doing, is reaching out to the firms that had our students and saying, what were the students doing? And, kind of prompting them, which of these hours were they, getting the
Sure.
experience for?
And then, as a precursor to communicating with the firms.
So this will
have them
change.
look at that so that they can kind of structure
Exactly.
the program
Yeah.
to accommodate.
So we didn't have this our first year, this is
No,
our
yeah.
second year.
Very beneficial.
Okay, well, thank you so much for giving us the
Thank
opportunity.
you for great presentation.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your diversity numbers. It's really refreshing after several years on architecture trying to see such positive numbers in terms of diversity. And then you have a great marketing team. The displays, to read all the information. That's a great presentation.
That was me on the train yesterday, but thank you. Going to San Diego. But yeah, I can't emphasize enough Catherine, I'd say half of her time is spent on this program. And that's again, a commitment that we're making. But the benefits to all of our students, it has benefits to all of them. So, thank you very much.
All right, well, we can move on to agenda item G, or we can break for early lunch. It's only 11:20. I know we're going to do it in another 40 minutes, but everybody has to really stay. We want to kind of incorporate.
I took cards here. If any of you have firms that want me to call
I'm
me.
going to come back at 11:30. Is when we can come back.
Yes, so we're extending that previous discussion on iPad just for a few more moments. We have another student available to talk to you. So I'd like to introduce Genevieve Namikis, and she's an MARC student. So she had began, so our BARC program is the first program that was accepted, and then the following year we applied to get the MARC program accepted. So Genevieve is one of our first MARC students to start the program.
So I'm Genevieve Enriquez. This is my second year on the MARC program. The firm that I worked for this past summer was actually BoardMeeting, which she's located in Silver Lake. They're actually relocating to another location. So during the 3 months, what I've been learning is AutoCAD, other programs, how to communicate to clients, how to tackle tasks in a certain time frame that the client requests us to do. So I've actually been jumped around in different projects with different people with different background experience, which is great. And even hanging out with our investor and like seeing how she gets all these architects together and all that stuff, and just bring it all up. I accumulated about 500 hours during the summer, so I was working full time, Monday to Friday. And one thing I really liked about it is that everybody was willing to teach me and give me like, oh, you should do it this way, and then I would like other people, oh, I do it this way, and stuff like that. So people have like different styles, which is really great. The diversity too that I work with, and also just just different approach of doing it. The reason why I'm taking a master's in architecture is because I have a business background as a bachelor's degree, and I feel like as architect students, I'm like thinking they just need to have a business aspect of everything, how to market yourself, how to sell your projects and stuff like that, how to price your projects and stuff like that. So that's something I'm kind of helping out here with my peers as well. So I know that they're struggling with that. So I'm kind of helping them out in a way. And then they're also teaching me their programs like, oh, this is how you should use it and all that stuff. And I want to become a licensed architect just because I just want to have better communication between contractors, architects, engineers, city planners, and everything like that. we just need to communicate better and just, build the best place to live. Yes. So I'm still in the process of everything, so I'm still learning as I go. And just like hearing everybody's background and just, be influenced and getting the encouragement to do better. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you for having us as part of your meeting. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Genevieve. Okay, let's move on to item G. Barry Williams, are you sure?
Yeah, a pretty schedule, a pretty robust meeting. The status review was very complete and formed in the reports. We had 5 items that we discussed. The first one we discussed the 2017-18 strategic plan objectives to update the building official engagement to better educate local officials on the architect's practice plan. And we did the same message in 2000. A little bit outdated. So the board's architect consultants and staff in the process of making necessary updates and revisions to content. The proposed changes to the plan will be presented to the ROC for review discussion this next week. One other thing I did talk about too is other ways of putting it out there. Electronically, something that they would look at. Our second item was we discussed the 2017-18 strategic plan objective to educate consumers on the standard of care so they understand what to expect from an architect when choosing to hire one. The staff presented with proposed methods to further educate consumers on the standards of care, including updating and expanding the content of the consumer section of the board's website, developing and sharing more consumer-oriented materials through the board's social media accounts, and promoting the architect consultant education and innovation program. The RC requested the staff research the intent of this objective, work for the RC to develop its message to consumers regarding standard care. And it was a pretty good discussion about that. So what does standard care help? What sort of sticky part really needs to what the standard care is. Third point, we discussed the 2017-18 strategic objective to measure the effectiveness of the board citation collection method as a means of protecting future consumers. And staff will assume that statistics related to the board citation collection rate over the past 5 years, which is currently at 54%, and successful collection rates of 78% for licensees, 41% for unlicensed individuals. Staff will reassess the effectiveness of the board citation collection methods after the collection agency contract is in place and the outstanding accounts have been pursued by the collection law. Fourth item is a discussion of the 17-18 strategic plan objective to develop educational materials for newly licensed architects to provide more information about the requirements in order to avoid future violations. Statutes intention to create a checklist for new licensees indicating license renewal and course requirements, mailing address, business entity reporting requirements, common violations of the Practice Act, information regarding the architect consultant education information program, as well as contract requirements, things like that. Draft checklist is planned to be presented to the RAC for review discussions next week. I'd also note that in looking at that, looking at the violations, it's noticing a number of violations, especially for continuing education, have the license need to improve. So I think that the main one we're looking at also, the requirements that we continue to have, this is things that remind all of us of the things that we have to do as part of not just the new process. And 5, the last one is we discussed proposed changes to the board's records retention schedule for complaints and citation records and the public disclosure of citations. On this one, the REC recommendation will be considered under Article G2, and I'm going to ask Alicia to present this here.
So, as Barry stated, I'm presenting agenda item G2, and it's regarding the possible action on the REC's recommended proposed changes to the board's record retention schedule. So every board in Maryland, the Department of Consumer Affairs is required to have a records retention schedule, and that's to be maintained and reviewed every 3 years. So with that in mind, our board's current schedule is set to expire in December of 2018. So the board currently requires complaint and citation records to be retained for those 5 years after the citations have closed. And then after those 5 years, we're to confidentially destroy any of those records. So originally, citations were to be retained in the board's office and disclosed to the public for 100 years. Back in 2002, the retention schedule was modified from 100 years to 20 years. In 2005, the schedule was modified again, and it was changed from 20 years down to 5 years, and this is where we're currently at right now. So to this day, that policy hasn't changed. At the REC meeting we had just a couple weeks ago, there was a conversation regarding the purpose of the modification, and the primary reason for recommending the modification was to increase the number of years of citation files that are retained, and the main purpose of this was because of consumer protection. So with that in mind, it's difficult to be able to establish a pattern of past citations that have been used, that will be used in future disciplinary and enforcement actions. With a 5-year retention schedule, it prevents staff from being able to disclose any disciplinary or enforcement information to consumers. And also, if the files are maintained for a longer period of time, it allows board staff to be able to have more time to collect outstanding fines from unlicensed individuals. So as I previously stated, the REC reviewed, discussed, and approved the proposal to increase the number of years for citations and complaints from 5 years to 10 years on the records retention schedule. We believe that the increased time will allow the board to better protect our consumers. With this information, we're asking that the board approve the REC's recommendation and to apply it to all the citations on or after today's date.
Any comment?
I have a couple of questions. One is, the staff have any knowledge why in 2005 the length is reduced from 20 years to 5 years? Seems a very dramatic reduction. Any recollection that you were helpful as to the rationale behind it?
From what I recall, like Alicia said, it was 100 years, which was waiting on what was going to be his disciplinary actions on for 100 years in case the person were to vote inside the disciplinary action when they petitioned to reinstate, so that he had that material still. So when they reduced it to 20, I think they got that's a reasonable amount for the types of violations that are issued for the citation. We had that for a while. I can't recall how many years when it was reduced to 5. I think they felt 5 was maybe the magic number to reduce it at that time. It seemed reasonable to be able to tell a consumer inquiring about the complaint history that they had this prior action. So now that we've had it for 5 years, a while, we're seeing some difficulties with it. Like Alicia said, if we're trying to establish a pattern, we're not supposed to have it in the records anymore. If we haven't collected an outstanding fine, we don't have that information then to say you should have to pay this fine. We're also finding when we invoke the Intercept program, which is the Intercept Tax program, So say an unlicensed person is issued a citation and they have stated it's fine with all their rights and exhausted, we refer the case over to the franchise tax board. And if they're awarded a refund or a lottery, then we get the money from that. There's certain priorities of that payoff. So we might not be top of the list to get any of that reward, but we do get that. So we're finding if it's beyond 5 years and they haven't been a refund from the tax board, we should have it laying in a record so that if the person has money taken from their refund from the taxes, they don't get this. So we're going to have to sever that tie with the intercept from that case. Kristen Walker, the enforcement analyst, did quite a bit of research on it. She did research with contractors, boards, engineers, profession. And if I recall, she had found that they're retaining them for 50 years. Public information. I believe it's only on their website for 5 and then it's disclosed to the public. So for 10 years we've got the amount that would fit our concerns and the problems that we've been having as staff trying to provide that information to consumers.
So my second question is that I support the extension, but I just thought that it's good from 100 years to the extreme 5 years, and it will provide a lot more credibility to the decision numbers. So I like expert like the cost statement and the qualifiers to see for some of the comparisons that the 10 years is a common practice, some best practice is not 12 years, not 15 years, for example, and then we can, I think, more comfortable.
Well, I don't know if it's a magic number, 10 is reasonable, the judgment is good for 10 years. In California, and so probably know that we have about 57 and get the 5, it seems to be appeals and like that, that is going to take some time for that to
Bob, any observation?
Like support with the staff has said, the issue has come about that getting rid of cases after 5 years, oftentimes someone doesn't second offend until like the 6th or 7th year. That's why they're going to continually that latitude. And I think that 10 years is the average retention schedule, if you will, for architects retaining their own documents. It seems like about 100 years was outrageous. 20 years was even more so. The issue that I bring up, and I was part of the discussion, is keep in mind this includes a lot of degrees of citation, all the way from missing the CE criteria, all the way up to having not having a written contract and other issues that affect the contract. So it goes a whole broad range of citations. 10 years seems to be the maximum that it should be in my mind.
General question. Is there any monetary impact to the number of years of retention?
It's also
It's also absorbable.
Does it cost more to retain? Okay.
Is the copy that records or
It's big. Our volume. I don't know any cabinets.
Any public comment here?
Thank you. Mark Christian with the American Institute of Architects, California Council. I think the arguments, as explained by to go from 5 to 10 years is very reasonable. We have absolutely no problem with that, especially as it involves unlicensed practice. The one's performance in providing architectural services, and one's relationship or contact with the clients, such as the written contract agreements. I would ask the board to consider if it does not involve contact with the client, it does not involve the providing the services, and we're going to talk about license violations, continuing education. Is there a good reason to move that retention policy from 5 to 10, or if that can be kept at 5 years, because again, it does not involve the performance of the services, it does not involve contact, relationship with the client. It's not a direct consumer affairs issue. So just for a suggestion for your consideration, would it be reasonable to keep that retention policy at 5 years if it could be divided in such a way for your consideration?
Just briefly, one, I'm going to ask our legal counsel to chime in on our ability to bifurcate the standard for different types of actions. But the other I'd point out as to CE, at first blush, it might look like a minor offense in terms of the relevant citation. But the reality is, for the vast majority of these, somebody is signed under penalty of perjury that they've completed their CE, and yet they haven't. So you have to wonder what other behaviors might be taking place in the marketplace on the part of these individuals.
There's a bit of discussion about that, saying that came up with we've got, because it is a city sign where it's a violation, it has to be that should be the same thing.
I have a question. So just so I have an understanding, if you received a complaint today and there had been a record 6 years prior, then we would have no record of it? So we would know if this was like a second time?
So I think what you're asking is, if 6 years ago there was a citation against someone, and let's say today they did something similar to that, we would have no record of that prior citation. So it would, based upon our records, look like this was the first time it had occurred.
But another point that I think you can shorten that time is, say you have a citation that's in effect, and then a couple years later they do something else. But while you're investigating that something else, if that other one drops off before the other one moves to either a hearing or doing another citation, it can't be added to that other complaint. It's just an aggravating factor that's happened. So even if the new one isn't received until after that second one is received, they say that in 5 years it might drop off all the. The other thing I was going to suggest is, because it's gone back and forth, between 5 and 120, we recommend 10, that your staff has been kind of applying this on what would be the best amount of time. And so we came up with 10 years. And that doesn't mean it's always set now, obviously, it's really already. So we can reassess it after a while and find if that's too long or if it's not enough still. But I think 10 might be closer to what we have.
Do you have a motion?
I make a motion to stop.
Oh, yes, please, sir.
I just wanted to answer those questions as to whether or not could I take some citation violations away from others based upon whether or not the citation itself goes next term, whether for those citations that go directly involve the public. I think the discussion here was constructive on the issue because if you're signing a perjury and lying, potentially even lying to the consumer as well. So I think there is a link, albeit not direct, but there is a link to consumer protection as as far as the legality of bifurcating as a hospital, you can cut out or work out some citations and have a different retention. But I would say that it's probably not advisable to do that because you create a curve out for some citations and then you open the door to creating other curve outs for varying lengths of time for other citations, which really just starts to create a workability issue and we have staff. And it seems at that point we really start getting away from consumer protection and disclosure for those situations where it's arguably necessary in a certain period of time. As Dr. Carter was saying, you sometimes reach the 5-year mark and then suddenly there's somebody at the 6-year mark. So we certainly don't want to encourage any violations of the parents based on so that's all. I just wanted to address that.
Any other discussion from the group?
Yeah, I wanted to ask AIA's, since we think I may have missed it, I think it state or restate the rationale for that consideration.
If it was a violation that did not involve the delivery of services or did not involve the relationship with the client, such as a written contract, if it was a violation of the act that did not do direct harm to the client, it could be 5-year detention policy remain if there's no direct harm to the general public or client.
So the rationale is that the continuing education is not required in the Is that the rationale?
No, it's a part of the Practice Act, but it does not have a direct involvement with the clients. It does not have direct involvement with the performance of the providing of the potential services. It would be a violation because it is technically a violation, technically it's a violation of the Practice Act to not complete it, to sign the statement of perjury, to I assume take the course that did not qualify, though if we did qualify, I assume I don't know for certain that as it does not involve any harm to the client, to the public, I was just asking if the 5-year existing 5-year retention period, and it felt very reasonable as they laid out the staff why the other one should go from 5 to 10.
So
no argument on that.
So AIA would consider that a diminishing of deliverables with respect to accessibility would be harmful.
There is no path. I'm not saying that at all. If a person is found out to have not properly completed the 5 hours of accessibility and continuing education, they're going to have to remedy it, pay a fine, and bring it to the board, and then take the coursework. We're not saying let's modify, let's change the fact that they have to take the 5 hours. Not at all. And they would do that as a license. Does that retention, what is the reason to keep that retention beyond 5 years? How is it protecting the public in a situation where you didn't take the right course, you didn't take the course, you found out, hey, you're fine, you take the course, you lose your license, you are protected to I don't know if there's any, maybe there is, I'm not trying to argue against anything, but I'm just saying, is there a question, where's the value of moving the retention from 5 to 10 in that type of violation? If that makes sense, just follow that reconsideration.
I tend to disagree as a consumer, and the reason for that is the original landscape of our environment is always changing, right? And now we have to implement new rules and regulations to build it. And as a consumer, I want to make sure that there's enough time to be able to correct it, and that's going to have all the knowledge available to them while putting that structure. I would say, if they're not keeping it
compensation item and then regular basic
So I understand, I think I understand what the simplified concern, but I think I thought that once citations are resolved in the council intervention, probably has a full access to see what the citations are about.
Yes.
So therefore, the consumer can judge if missing that the ADA training is a huge issue, maybe the design possibility on this guy's okay. But if they design my house, I probably all focus on other performance of the skills and so may not be much of a problem.
Very fair point, and maybe I think the board will not to express my feelings on
Okay, roll call vote.
I call that John Baker. Aye. Denise Temple.
Aye.
Leon James. Aye. Pascal here. Aye. Sylvia Plum. Anthony Ruiz. Matthew Bob Gilby. Aye. Yes, that's
Aye.
Very good.
Okay, motion passed.
Can you clarify the second item motion?
Okay, so we're 12:04. How much time do we need for lunch? 45 minutes, an hour? Alright, well, let's go 45. Come back at 12:50.
No, it's just a little.
We're gonna start at 12:50.
Okay.
Agenda item H, which is the landscape architect technical committee report. And Barry Miller, when you're ready, you can go ahead and start it.
I believe I'm ready. So, first item up, 8.1, is an update on the LATC July 13th, 2017 meeting, which took place in Sacramento. What you have here as an attachment is a copy of the meeting agenda. Really, I'm going to go over it very quickly. We were very fortunate to have Dan there joining us. But the heavy hitter items of the day were a discussion of initial licensure eligibility pathways, related degrees and experience-only pathways, as well as a discussion of reciprocity. Those are coming up next, so I'll hold my synopsis of that. We also touched on our enforcement program, which included a review of our annual statistics, as well as we reviewed an updated iteration of our disciplinary guidelines, which the LATC approved for your all as well. Last up, we talked quite a bit about the Council of Landscape Architectural Registration Programs, CLAR. The annual meeting is next week, and so we have some business related to that, including electing on board of directors, as well as a review of the draft model law and regulations. And then, as Doug mentioned earlier, we discussed the strategic and objectives to recommend the formation of an AXP-like program as well. So, if there aren't any questions about that overview, I can jump right into the licensure discussion. Okay, so next up is agenda item 8.2. This one is a discussion of both the initial and reciprocal licensure eligibility requirements. In reflection of what you all mentioned to us back in June, that these are very harmonious issues, and so we presented them as such in one item. So, if the board will allow me, I'm speaking to, I can pick up where we left off in June. There is historical information, if you wish to brush up on it, in attachments 2 and 3. But really to pick up where we left off during the June board meeting, LATC brought forward a proposal for reciprocity licensure, and it was one that the LATC had approved in our April meeting. We brought it for your consideration. And you all conveyed that the reciprocity and initial licensure requirements should be very closely aligned and also aligned with the boards for possible with the inclusion of an experiential pathway. So you all expected LTC to come back, formulate a proposal, which to bring forward to you today. So in response to that, staff was back and we got to work and we came up with a draft table of equivalence to amend CCR 2620, and that's a technical to take a look at it. And we really heavily based that on the board's own requirements. So we brought that to the LATC at the July 13th meeting, and after much discussion, what you see here on pages 2 and 3 of the narrative here, shown in blue are those pathways that the LATC accepted as written. And notably, these are, this language has incorporated edits. Some of it is existing pathways with minor changes to reflect more of the wording of the boards to make it even more closely aligned. And then what you see here in pink is our pathways that the LATC accepted as written, but referred to a subcommittee for further vetting and kind of discussion to make them defensible pathways, to discuss credit given for each of these pathways, because of them being brand new with allocate credit, and to kind of just vet what it would look like versus when the degree supposed to be, as well as the experience when we packed on what that would look like. So we're in the process of formulating an education/experience subcommittee. We have all members determined. Member Gutierrez is going to be a part of it. And we're seeking to meet on October 3rd. And then from there, the recommendation will be issued to the LATC during our November meeting. And then from there, we will issue the LATC's recommendation to you all in December. So that's a little overview of where we're at with the initial licensure aspect. With regard to reciprocity, the LATC's determination is that, yes, they really should fit in line. And so with all the work that we're putting into initial licensure, the determination is once that's established, let's build the reciprocity that reflects it. So what you have in your attachments are first a letter from our committee chair to you all, further expressing the decision that was made and why. You have that historical information I mentioned, a reference to Florida jurisdictions and which degrees they accept. You also have our proposed amended language to the entirety of CCR 2620, and lastly, for reference, what the board's table of equivalence is. So, that all being said, we're asking that you consider the information provided and take possible actions accordingly. And Mark is here as well to provide further insights.
Any discussion?
I guess the conversation as the president and that some of the meeting and also the meeting, and it's a very focused and a very lively debate about experience only argument. And I thought the debate was very meaningful and very informed. And I also that the board is moving on and the board to have the subcommittee, education committee, right, to work out the details. Under the premise that the well-accepted experience only, that in line with the board policy here, with the articles, that will work out the details and how these experience and equivalents to apply. How do they apply credit or units that then become qualified for the action. So I thought it was a very good process, and that action we're taking, I hope we recognize the groundwork today and the next
I'm just looking for some clarification to help me understand. On the list of equivalents and credits that you have listed, you've got the
Are you looking at section 5?
attachment 5, yes.
Okay.
On the experience only category, all the categories have a certain amount of credits that can be, a maximum amount of credits that can be accrued. So I assume that if you get a maximum of 4 years of credit to a certain degree, then the remainder of the 8 years that you require would be an experience. I assume that's how that balance works.
Right, and you require 6 years.
So, because it says out of 8 years at the top of that chart, so I assume 8 years is the magic number like this. No?
Oh, so this chart shows in that gray area, if you're looking, that is the board's credit for, that was for the LATC reference that we provided. So the gray area wouldn't be a part of any proposal. It was simply just to educate them, not knowing whether during the meeting they were seeking to hammer out what the credit would be.
So which board are you referring to? Oh, okay. So it just said board, so I thought.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Maybe I just didn't understand how the chart worked. Okay. Thank you.
Any discussion?
Really cool question.
Yeah.
No motion is really required, it's up to you. We'll see in December.
Actually, well, I might.
Good. That's the activity, all the strategy, and all the talk.
They're going to be responsible. Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's-
Looks like the information.
Okay. Moving on to H3, then would be to review and possible action on recommendation for proposed amendments to LATC disciplinary guidelines.
Yes.
CCR guidelines, section 26.
And for these, I'll be brief. I know you all are familiar with the disciplinary guidelines, and I know it's been going on for a few years now. The process of updating them. I believe ours were last updated in 2000. And with the board approving their disciplinary guidelines in December of 2016, we really used that as a jumping off point to say, okay, got it, we're going to mirror what the board has established and update ours as well. So what you see in the attachments a lot of track changes and a lot of highlights. The highlighted portions are all of the new language that the board has not yet seen. The LATC did consider these in July, and they did vote to recommend to you all to approve them. I also know that Legal Counsel Kara Welch had some additional feedback she'd like to offer. So if you're ready for it, I can turn it over to you.
Yes.
Okay.
That sounds good. Okay, so having just joined the board and as well as LATC, I reviewed the guidelines and noted there were a few substantive items that should be reviewed by this board for possible revision, mainly because there's a trend toward increased scrutiny by the Office of Administrative Law in respect to necessity and severity standards. So what I'd like to do is go through. I think it's just going to be easier if I can get a page number of the concerns I have on my proposed revisions to the pages, so that we're all on the same level page with my recommendations. All right, so. On page 3, item 9.
So ours electronic there. Okay.
What page is
So page 3 would be 81.
I've got item C on the same page.
Yes.
It shows that the title cost reimbursement would be changed to cost recovery. And I'm advising for consistency purposes because most of the rest of the guidelines refer to cost reimbursement. But that should just remain the same with no change. So it would just be returned to cost reimbursement. And I have a similar change on page 20 for that. So obviously that was pretty minor. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. All right, so under heading D, factors to be considered, item 9. So the factors to be considered, this is actually just a list for board members to keep in mind when determining the extent of discipline. However, item 9 appears to be consideration of the respondent's actual conduct, which would prove or disprove the violation itself. So, if, say, respondent intentionally violated one of the Practice Act statutes or regulations, there has to be either a preponderance of the evidence if it's an applicant or clear and convincing evidence of that intentional conduct to find that there was a violation. That then starts the question as to the level of discipline appropriate for the finding of that violation. Item 9 actually is whether or not you found that evidence, either by preponderance or clear and convincing. So I propose that item 9 be deleted entirely because those arguably are already included on subsequent pages listed for each statute and the minimum and maximum amounts for discipline. So what I'm saying here is item 9 is inappropriate and unnecessary to be included under factors. Do you want to have a discussion on each item? That might just be easier. You can just ask it.
I think personally both of your recommendations were fine.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else has any opinion on the recovery reimbursement. And then number 9, it's in the policy area.
Yeah.
Well, how about we continue then if one of the members has a problem?
Sounds good. Okay.
Well, last question, and I think that comment 9, under 1, where it talks about severity of the acts, nature of the acts, to some extent, one could incorporate these in there, I guess, analysis too. So if you felt that the factors were there, then you say that's that would be the nature of the conduct, severity of the intentional.
So, maybe if they're found to have violated the contract requirements and the severity of that violation is serious harm to the client, then you would take that into consideration for number 1. You already evidence proves the violation. And then when you're looking at the harm done, the nature of the harm, how severe it was, then you use criteria number 1 to determine whether or not that individual requires minimum or maximum discipline. Okay. The next one is on page 6. It's room numeral 4, disciplinary guidelines, in that next line. This is the offenses are listed by statute. That was fine when you were just referring to the Business and Professions Code, but these revised guidelines now include a reference to the California Code of Regulations, which are regulations. So I'm recommending to change the word statute on that first line to instead of section. So it would read, the offenses are listed by section number in the Business and Professions Code or California Code of Regulations. All right, so the next one is on page 10. At the top of the page, it says section 5675, felony conviction sanctions for reference. At the bottom, toward the bottom of the page, section 5676, plea of nolo contendere. That section 5676 is actually broader than just a plea of nolo contendere with respect to a criminal conviction. It actually includes a plea or verdict of guilty or a conviction following a plea of nolo contendere. So I'm recommending that we strike plea of nolo contendere. That's it. So that it would just read criminal conviction sanctions. All right, the next proposed revision is on page 19. At the top, it starts off with number 3, personal appearances. Going down 2 items to item 5, maintain active and current license. In the second sentence, it says failure to pay all fees prior to respondent's license expiration date shall constitute a violation of probation. It's unclear here what fees we're talking about, whether they relate to probation fees, what fees exactly. So I'm proposing that we just insert the word renewal fees. Next one is on page 20. Item 8, it's item U8, titled Violation of Probation. When I reviewed the revisions to this section, I noted that it's unclear the necessity of adding these terms. Because effectively, they would sidestep due process. So the sentence, notice and opportunity to be heard, are not required for those provisions stating that a violation thereof may lead to automatic termination of the stay and or revocation of the license. While I'm not exactly sure what provisions this sentence is referring to, that's unclear. But also, what is the necessity not to give a probationer an opportunity to be heard on subsequent violations that are alleged? So, presumably, we're talking about maybe someone filed a complaint against a probationer. That complaint has not been investigated. It has not been proven. It hasn't, an accusation hasn't been filed, no citation is being considered, but we're going to automatically terminate the stay and or revoke the license. So that looks like a denial of due process otherwise required under the APA.
Question. The first sentence in the paragraph says if the respondent violates probation. So I presume from that statement they've already been convicted of having violated. It doesn't say it was accused of violating probation. So would this possibly be taking place after the ruling has been
That's correct. This speaks to, okay, so we have proof that you did it, you violated the Practice Act. These are now all of the terms of your probation. And if you screw up and you don't meet all of these terms, that would be a violation. This provision is already in the guidelines, and as it reads today, without these proposed revisions, it's similar, if not identical, to all other boards for violating probation. The problem is that we're adding notice and opportunity to be heard, and it's unclear why. What is the reason? If they violate probation because of these terms already listed in the order of decision, that is a requirement. You are required to, meet all of these terms. If you violate any of those terms, the respondent who does that, the board, after giving respondent notice and opportunity to be heard, which is appropriate. That's due process. So I didn't take my ethics class, and that was a term of my probation. So I have violated probation. Well, I need to be given an opportunity to come in and say, I tried to take my ethics. I paid my money, and the company I was taking the ethics class from went bankrupt. So, I'm doing everything I can to meet that requirement. That's an opportunity to be heard. When we go to that second sentence, notice is not required. So, with the changing tide of reviewing regulations with a very critical eye to make sure that we're not overcomplicating licensure, and making sure that we're complying with the government code and the Administrative Procedure Act. I can't think of a reason why notice and an opportunity to be heard is appropriate. So I'm proposing that sentence be repeated. Additionally, in the next sentence, the proposed revisions on or the matter is referred to the Attorney General's office. So when I read the whole thing, if an accusation or petition to revoke probation is filed against the respondent during probation, or the matter is referred to the AG's office. So there's a violation, maybe, and it's referred to the AG's office. But nothing has been proven, no accusation has been filed. It's just sitting on an AG's desk. Again, that looks like a violation of due process because here the board shall have continuing jurisdiction until the matter is final, and the period of probation shall automatically extend until the matter is final. So a complainant contacts the board, hey, I think they're in violation of probation, or I've got a new complaint that you guys haven't even decided. So I'm just going to complain. Reality is that somebody's brother and they're getting a divorce. The brother contacts the board, hey, that guy is in violation of the Practice Act. In reality, he's married to my sister. I'm going to get him in trouble. So, I know it sounds really outlandish, but that happens. The point here is, why are we extending probation just because someone complained and it hasn't been thoroughly reviewed by the board? That's when it's final. Or, at the very least, an accusation has been filed, initiating formal proceedings. So if somebody can just call in and make a complaint, and somebody's probationary period is automatically saved, that's a problem. Once again, it really appears to sidestep due process for questionable reason. So with this next sentence, I'm also recommending that it remain the way through actions today without any of the underlined text and return until the matter is final. Because that's actually a really important piece of the process, is that the matter has been finalized. Also, the next paragraph appears to be a restatement of the sentences and provisions I'm recommending be deleted from the prior paragraph. And that also suffers from a necessity problem. So I'm recommending that paragraph also be deleted. So at the end of the day, what I'm talking about is not making these revisions to violation of probation. And in effect, substantively, it would stay the way it is today with no revision. I found there's one minor technical correction that could be made, but it's not important enough to even discuss. The bigger issue are the substantive issues for your consideration.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that first paragraph, the last sentence? Until the matter is final, you're not going to delete that first sentence mentioned, so it'll be in that sentence twice.
Oh, that's a good point. Let's go ahead and strike there.
So
that one provision.
The first time it says until the matter is final, stay that.
Yeah.
These, the LATC is one of the guidelines, right? But if they're based in part of ours, do any of these comments mean that we need the board sort of equivalent capacity to make sure it has any words there too?
Yes.
So whatever you agree upon today, then we'll look back at what you previously approved already.
You're getting ahead of me. I was going to try that but yeah, I mean, the point being that I'm reviewing these are the LATC guidelines for your consideration today. They're based on the board's guidelines already approved last December. They have not been submitted to DCA yet for re-review to start the OAL process. If the board agrees to make my recommendations to the LATC guidelines, the board should also review the board's guidelines at its next meeting. And at the end of the day, I know you guys keep looking at these guidelines over and over, but that actually makes it a quicker process rather than going through DCA review with these notations about potential problems and then it getting denied and returned back to you at a later time. So I'm suggesting that making the corrections today with LATC and potentially in December with the board's guidelines that streamlines the process. Any other questions about page 20? Okay, so on page 22, item 16, the cost reimbursement appropriation is mentioned on page 3. The recommendation is to not change the title. And then at the very end, after the two forms, so it's quarterly probation report, and then there's a second page of that. At the top, it says, I think, attachment J 2.2, landscape architect, technical committee, proposed regulatory language. This is the actual regulation that needs to be revised with the disciplinary guidelines. In the authority, I'm recommending that section 11425.50 subdivision E of the government code actually be changed to read 1140020. That is because the current citation that this regulatory package would make to insert 11425.50E, that refers to penalties under the APA. On the other hand, 11400.20 refers to the board's authorization to adopt permanent regulations to govern adjudicative proceedings, which is obviously more broad and provides potentially the appropriate government code authorization for promulgating these decisions. So I would recommend making that change as well. That's it.
I have one question on page 22 on the cost and recovery, cost of reimbursement. Do they have up to now I was on the items where we can't charge more than it's usually $7,000. Do they have the same amount or do they have one that's lower?
So if you're talking
Yeah,
citations, yes.
Our fines are really because the cost is up. We're charging for the attorney time, the investigation time, and the time it takes staff to
Citation penalties are specified in our regs for this. I don't know if it's a cap.
I haven't seen a cap.
I was just asking.
Yeah.
Right.
And mainly because I think each case is different, so it requires different time to be expended either in investigating it or prosecuting.
We provide a breakdown, when it gets to that point, we provide a breakdown of, say, the architect consultant's time. And we're only allowed, I think it's Business and Professions Code that says that we're only allowed to request reimbursement for the costs incurred for the investigation. So once it gets referred to the Deputy Attorney General, those costs aren't allowed to be in the proposed decision. So then the judge will look at the breakdown that we gave and determine how much to put in the decision that they involved.
Any discussion on the terms of proposed changes? Any discussions on the guidelines themselves? Do we have a motion?
So I have a motion. The motion should be to propose or to approve changes. The guidelines as.
I think we take a motion to.
So when we do regulatory motions, it's always a really good idea to read the whole thing, which is a bit wordy, but the motion for your consideration is to move to approve the proposed regulatory changes as modified for noticing a 45-day comment period and to be set for hearing if requested. I'm reading it wrong. I need to go back. Starting over. I move to approve the proposed regulatory changes as modified and direct the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the formal rulemaking process and authorize the executive officer to make any non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package, and if no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, adopt the proposed regulatory changes as modified.
It's as modified and your
Because they modified it, and you modified it. So what you have before you is the proposed regulatory change, and what I brought forward today would be the modification. Okay.
That was my second.
We have a motion, and Rob second. Okay, any discussion? Roll call vote.
John Davis.
Aye.
Denise Campbell.
Aye.
Carol Payne, aye. Pascal Mosqueda.
Aye.
Hilda Klein.
Aye.
Kathleen Woody.
Aye.
Anthony Moreno.
Aye.
Robert Steelman.
Aye.
Joe Pasquale.
Aye.
Larry Williams.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Tara, good job.
Good work, everyone.
Matt, before we go on, can I ask something about the landscape architect in general?
Yeah, you bet.
One is, I forgot this in the introduction report, but it said that it looked like the CSE pass rate for landscape architects was like 70% 2 years ago, and it dropped to 50% of last year. I think that was a big deal, or just want to emphasize, or
I'll leave it looking to that for you, Robert. I don't have information as to the candidate pool or what else I can provide, so I'll follow up with you.
And then the second comment was that I recall at the last meeting, we talked about the training and experience and education requirements. One of the commentators pointed out, I guess, that the committee doesn't have any public members. I think by statute, it's just licensed fee, basically. And I'm wondering whether or not there's any historical reason for that. Should we think about, changing that in light of the North Carolina decision? Maybe there's less opposition to that. As a public member, I guess, in honesty, I think they do add value. We have to change the statute. The DCA just appoint someone. We just appoint someone next officio. I'd like to at least have that.
Sure, we'll do that. The issue was raised during the sunset review, not the most recent one, but the one prior. At that point, the prior administration, the proposal was rejected. So it has been considered previously, but not under the current administration. We can certainly look at that.
And somehow this board, because this board has public members and therefore something with other things that are bigger.
That is part of the rationale. All of their actions, disciplinary actions, regulatory amendments, come to this board and enjoy the benefit of our 5 years.
Yeah, but I thought, like I said, even having them directly there, people are saying it's not statutory, it's official. Right? Makes sense, if you're saying it makes sense to us to be here, overseeing it, it would equally make sense that you might be here. It's just
Let's move on to agenda item 9, which is review of future board meeting dates. Next date is January 7th. And Sacramento. If you think that's just a one-day meeting, which is nice, we don't have a few meetings here.
Correct, part of a 2-year plan.
Okay. Yeah, works for me. All right, let's move on to agenda item J.
Oh, can I just comment about the dates? I do appreciate staff sending out the Google Calendar, but just in general, something to consider for next year or as we move forward. Thursdays for me are just the toughest days. They're so busy with so many other meetings, it's just always a conflict on Thursday. So just need to be here for next year.
Would it be possible to move to like a Wednesday or a Tuesday?
Yeah, we'll accordingly next time.
I think you tried that this time.
Right.
What if we plan it?
Just as a workaholic.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Another workaholic.
Yeah. Are we ready to move into closed session?